What if we could learn from outstanding leaders in business, sports, and education from some of the best voices in corporate America? Lighting the Path is a series of interviews with industry leaders whose stories highlight strategies that build purpose-driven cultures, engage and retain top talent, develop drivers that create high-performance teams, and connect people to the vision of your company. Join us to hear from game-changing, talented leaders whose paths make a difference at work and at home.
When you think in terms of scaling a business, going from thought to systems, processes, and adding people to it, you have to look at something in a way of creating something. And today's guest is I was anxious to find out what's going on in his head, and the reason why is because he's got a new book that just came out, and the book is called Build Something: Building Products, Business, and what caught my heart, culture. Because I think all three of those have to do with any time we're scaling. So I'm excited to introduce you to Michael Serta. And Michael, thanks for being part of the show today.
Thank you, Mike. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm super excited to have this conversation with you and reach your audience, and hopefully we can do some fun stuff together today.
Oh, I guarantee we're going to do that because you got an amazing background. If you're looking at Michael's experience and kind of where he got from there to here. Early career started off in sales and then just exploded with these few little, you may have heard them before, companies like Facebook, Disney Plus. Spent some time with Televisa. Is it Televisa? I'm saying basically Univision. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're talking about global footprints, and you excelled in the space of technology. Mike, as you built your career, and you've managed to find ways to be able to get people connected to causes, is what from our conversation, my research I've done on you. What have you learned in your journey that kind of helped open the door, your insight, and your discovery on the importance of cause when you're trying to connect people's hearts to mission?
Yeah. So look, traditionally, I think it's always been the boss tells you what to do when you do it. That's like how the world kind of traditionally operated. And I got to a point to where I was an emerging leader, and I started to stumble upon the idea that you don't have to tell people what to do. All you have to do is envision and communicate a North Star, an outcome, or a set of outcomes. From that becomes a strategy of how to reach those outcomes. Within that strategy are tactics that people go after that are a part of your team. And so long as they keep that outcome, that North Star, that strategy intact, obviously with appending along the way with new information, because sometimes you do get new information along the way, and that should be a gift. Mm-hmm. You factor in. Not everybody realizes that either. Like that's a gift. And so it's like, no, we didn't change our mind. We learned more. So we amended the plan, right? Anyway, you make people a part of these things. And what happens is if you can empower people that are closest to the action, closest to the work, and they have all of those things I mentioned, they kind of start doing it for each other. And they're empowered, therefore they're invested, therefore they're committed, therefore things happen and manifest. And I kind of view my role as, in leadership as being the orchestration layer for all of that to stay connected, and empowered, and to keep it connected.
It sounds like you learned somewhere, maybe even early on, to move from being the doer to the conductor. That's kind of what I'm envisioning. You're a musician. I didn't think about this. You're a musician. So you moved from being the person who's over there playing the drums, or is that a bass I see over your right shoulder over there? So yeah. So from being, playing the instrument to being the conductor who's in charge of really making the music come alive and pulling people together. And
I'm still a band leader, and I still do this stuff. Uh-huh. And it's the same thing. It's the same practice, really. Leadership is agnostic of the domain. Mm-hmm. In this case, we're talking about careers and working in companies with teams. But yes, in music, it's the same thing. I used to teach yoga. It was the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I put on lots of events where I cook for a lot of people. All the same thing. Orchestration, conducting, as you say. I think that's the key word.
Yeah. But we were talking earlier before we got online, had to do talking about connecting people's hearts to mission. And it's a common theme I've had with people I've interviewed recently, is this whole thing about being heart leadership. I'm kind of attracted to those kind of people, I think, because I believe so strongly in that. If I can, and you mentioned, I love this. Well, let's do this. Let's start with Facebook. Because if you look at the book, the first chapter, you start off talking about Facebook and about that early, that early, you actually were in meetings with Zuckerberg, and at the early stages. And I'm really curious about what life was like and you're learning lessons from those early stages, because it's a twofold question. I'll tell you where I'm headed. From a leadership standpoint, what did you see? And I don't want to brand Zuckerberg, the Mark's. I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, but as a leader, what did he do well? And the follow-up, of course, is going to be from what did you learn that you wish he had done differently?
Yeah. So those times were very formative for the company, for people that used the company's apps, namely at the time, Facebook and Instagram. WhatsApp came along later, of course. If you remember to the early days, a lot of the Facebook news feed had things like cat pictures or pictures of what you just barbecued or, whatever. Friend sharing stuff. It turned out that at one point or another, people started sharing links to articles and videos and other kinds of content that wasn't personally created. So we called this inside of Facebook public content, and the other stuff was friend content, friend sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And public content became, we took that term and made it media. So I led product management for the media side of product in Facebook. So I literally, my job was to put the news in the news feed, like the news. And so then we had to go talk to news publishers about, hey, New York Times, CNN, Fox, etc. Put more news into the machine here. And our job's going to be to deliver it to all the people that like your stuff, right? Plumbers delivering people the stuff that they want, whether it's hot water or cold water or something in between. And I think what Mark did phenomenally well is he empowered those of us closest to that action to put the plan together. Now, he wanted to review it, which is the purpose of the Friday morning Zuck review, as it was a ritual. And how lucky could you be to be in that lineup on a given Friday morning? So I remember being in one of those, revealing this strategy to Mark and Cheryl and 20 of their closest folks, and of course nobody's saying anything. They're waiting to see what Mark says, right?
Of course, that's exactly the problem leaders have, right?
Yeah. And I said something at one point. I said something like, if we are as half, or if we are like half as good as we think we might be at putting this news in the newsfeed, at some point we may have a responsibility on our hands. And Mark says, why? I said, well, because we're going to be connecting people to the news sources they like and getting them the news that only they want. Why? Because we're going to be prompting them to connect to their favorite news sources, and we're going to be encouraging the news publishers to put more of that stuff in. Why? And well, because we're going to route all the stuff to the people that want the stuff, right? He kept pushing why. So the great thing he did was empowered people like me to put a strategy and a plan together. I think where it fell short was not envisioning the draft on impact the same way, right? I was talking about what could be the draft on impact, and he's like, well, what's that going to be? I'm like, well, we might create the world's largest echo chambers. When you talk about billions of people and hundreds of millions, if not more, articles each week, and people only listening and reading and consuming and sharing the stuff that they think is right and real. This is how society has evolved in the last 15 years. This is how certain elections materialized, and it's why families and friends are polarized. And I'm not saying it's just because we put the news in the newsfeed, but it had a big part.
It's an influencer, isn't it?
It's an influencer, yeah. And this is why there's friends I went to high school with that I don't talk to as much now, because it's become a polarizing situation, or certain topics don't even come up at the Thanksgiving table that used to, right? Because you don't want to get there, because it become too emotional and too, all of that. So I think the challenge, not just with Mark and Facebook and Meta, it's all of the big tech companies, that the challenge they still have, that I hope will improve, is that these leaders can take more of a responsibility and looking forward to what that draft on impact could be. Because I feel like we're at another inflection with AI, right? When you look at all of the companies that are out there now racing, there's kind of an arms race, if you will, happening. And some are going to market faster than others to get the share and to get further, and to get to AGI, the ultimate. And what you worry about is that it might not be the best thing for mankind at a certain pace. Like, do we want to get there tomorrow? Sure. Is that the best thing for humankind? I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's this whole concept of speed. What happens is, if we're moving too fast, we can sometimes be sending the wrong message as leaders. And that's the message I'm hearing you talk about. It has to do with, sometimes speed is our friend. We got to get there before someone else. More often than not, speed is our enemy. Because what happens when we're moving so fast, two things happen. We don't get enough information to the table to be able to make decisions. And second of all, speed sometimes interrupts buy-in. Where we're moving so fast, we don't allow enough time and space for our people to connect with mission, to connect and get an understanding, because they get caught up in transaction mode. They get caught up in doing, as opposed to being part of it. Is kind of what I'm hearing you talk about. I need you to unpack something for me. Is that you talk about, and this is for those of us who don't come out of the technology space, but you're talking about, are you saying draft on impact?
Draft on, like follow on impact, like the things that could happen because of this.
Okay.
So an example of that was like, kids that grew up with social media, some of the draft on impact was a degree of mental illness, unfortunately, right? With FOMO, when kids are posting up videos and pictures and things of the party that you weren't invited to.
Yeah.
Right. And what that created. It created an us and them, and it sort of created a sense of isolation. And I refer to that as draft on impact, things that you should be thinking about, like, what's the worst case look like? Let's model that and understand what that is, and figure out how we can back away from it in our strategy.
Yeah. And that goes back into what you're talking about. It's the leader's role is to point to the North Star, is to have enough of a long range vision and not be so caught up in short term problems and issues that you miss out on the impact of the spiral. The example you just gave, because we're talking about social media at this point in time, is the statistics that I just ran into in the last 6 months has to do with the amount of antidepressants that are being prescribed for young girls has quadrupled or more. I mean, that made in the last 5 years. I mean, it's just because of this social image issue there, and I think where this word drafted has to do with, when they talk about drafting, it's you have the truck going in front of you, coming in, drafting behind it, so you're getting pulled in a direction. And as leaders, I think that the message that I'm hearing you speaking to me has to do with, you can be very careful about, where am I drafting? Where's my team being drafting? Where's it being pulled along? And my role as a leader is to kind of come in and help to steer that current and be able to help point people's attention on the things that are most important, especially when you're looking at building something of value. What did you learn in your journey? Because you talk about the importance of building trust. Again, another common theme. Spent a lot of time with Patrick Lencioni's model. 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. You know, the first major platform is build trust. And trust is not honesty, it's safety. Do I create an environment where people feel safe? When you've been scaling operations, what did you learn about the importance of trust?
I learned that it's really the foundational aspect to the rest of it. The you know, if you can create a psychologically safe place, an environment, and you have empathy for people, they're doing it for each other, like I said before, they're drafting on the North Star, doing all of those things. They start doing it for each other, and you need trust for that all to go forward. And I think what's funny is while the book is a chronological telling of me telling stories of all these companies and how things went down, that's kind of that would be the high level surface. But the lead that's buried is, of all the things you can build, the companies, the teams, the whatever, of all the things you can build, the one thing that matters most comes down to building a culture which contains things like trust, belief. You mentioned earlier something about people's heart being in it.
Mm-hmm.
That all comes with that. That's what you get. So, for example, I remember trying to scale Disney Plus. We found ourselves in the middle of a pandemic, and literally we were one day going into offices and traveling to different offices, and would go into Burbank and all these things, to all of a sudden everybody being in their homes for the first time. We all shared that in common, of course, all of a sudden. So how do you motivate people that way? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it became like, wait a minute, we have a mission here. Our mission really became to entertain, families, young people and families with some of the best stories ever told. So that, drafting on that, going back to that word, drafting on that became a whole way of doing things. It's like,
Thanks for joining us today on Lighting the Path, Strategies for Tomorrow's Leaders. If anything in this podcast speaks to you, if I've challenged you, or if you want to spend time digging into this subject a little deeper, or if you disagree with me, reach out. My contact information is on our website, lightingthepath.net, or email me at mike@mikelejeune.com. Also, look for me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect our networks. Keep lighting the path for those who choose to follow you. It's more than a responsibility. It's an honor.